Hello, everyone. This is Jonathan Little for PokerNews.com. Today, we're going to be going over a hand that I played recently in a 5,000 euro buy-in European Poker Tour main event. We're playing 150-300, and a guy in seat 4 who just got moved to the table opens to 700. We are playing about 17,000 chips deep, so not incredibly deep stacked, but at the same time, certainly not shallow. With ace-9 suited in the cutoff seat, I think you can go either way between calling or re-raising. I don't really hate either play. I think in general, you're probably going to be better off 3-betting this hand versus the average player with these stack sizes, but calling is certainly acceptable, especially in live poker, where if you get the read that this guy is overly straightforward or overly weak, you can just call and play really well in position. So I'm okay with this, although I would generally prefer just 3-betting. The problem is you don't want to 3-bet and then get 4-bet, but this is an okay hand to fold if you do get 4-bet. So flop comes king, king, 2, 1 club. My opponent checks, and if I bet in this scenario, I think it's very likely that I'm going to be getting called primarily only when I'm beat. So if I do bet, it's a protection bet to try to make hands like queen, jack, and 8-7 fold, because those hands do have some equity, and I don't really mind just picking up the pot versus those. So if I do bet, I want to bet on the smaller side, but this is a scenario where I think I just want to check and try to get close to showdown. Of course, we do lose to hands like ace-queen and ace-jack that may fold if I bet the flop, turn, and river, but I'm not really trying to make those hands fold. I think we're just happier seeing a cheap showdown. So we'll just happily check, unless we improve in some way. Turns 9, we improve. That's good. My opponent now leads for 1,300. Kind of a curious bet, given he checked the flop. Usually when people check king, king, 2, they typically have a marginal showdown value hand, kind of like mine. And a lot of those hands really don't want to be betting on the turn. Like ace, queen has no real reason to bet the turn, because he's, again, only going to be getting called when he's beat. So I don't really know what to make of this bet. Of course, he could just have a slow-played king, or he could have pocket queens, jacks, or 10s and be value betting. But I don't really see how I can fold now that I have picked up a pair. Trying to see if any other play ever has merit here. And I think calling is just a pretty easy decision. So I do call. There's no point in raising, because if I raise again, it's kind of like if my opponent's betting ace-queen, he's only going to call me when I'm beat. So river's a king, and my opponent checks. Now I think I certainly should go for value. Pot's 4,700, and I decided to go for a big bet, 5,000. The purpose of this bet is to try to get called by any pair, most of which we beat. And also, I do think when I make this big bet size, my opponent will sporadically think I have a hand like queen jack, queen 10, or jack 10, and then look me up with ace high that he decided to bet on the turn. Of course, many players would not bet that ace high on the turn, as I just stated. But you never really know what your opponents are doing. You have to be very careful when you're trying to assess your opponent's range if they are not exactly on the level that you are, because some players will just not play like you play, is what it amounts to. If they don't play like you play, and this guy decides to bet ace-queen on the turn every time just because he thinks that's what he's supposed to do, and you assume he never can have ace-queen, well, that's not going to work out too well for you in the long run, because you're going to be taking hands out of your opponent's perceived range that are actually in his range. So I always make a point to keep my opponent's range somewhat wide in my mind. It's not like I think this guy can never have ace-queen, whereas I do think some players, usually players who do not make it to the high stakes, they do sit there and think this guy can never have ace-queen, I call. Or he never has ace-queen, and then they bet a different size for whatever reason. Anyway, though, this is a scenario where I think we can very cleanly get value with our 9, so I do like to value bet. And then, somehow, my opponent raises to 14,900, or 15,000, something like that. So 3 times my bet. Well, now I'm sick. Usually when you make this large bet size on the river, it's a somewhat polarized bet to where it's going to be either a very strong made hand or a junky hand. Obviously, I have near the bottom of a very strong made hand range, but I still think it's fine to make this bet size, especially given I think a lot of players will find a hero call when you make these big bets. But when my opponent raises, I think I actually have an easy fold. I don't really think much of this spot. I think my opponent's going to show me a king almost every time. He could easily have ace, king, and check the flop, king, queen, king, jack, king 10, king 9. I think he could certainly check all of those on the king, king 2 flop. Not what I would do, but that is what a lot of people do. Again, this goes back to trying to read hands. I am virtually always betting a king on this flop because it's so easy to get called by ace high or any pair, but a lot of people do not play that way. They like to just check. And when he check raises the river, unless he's just really losing his mind, I think that this is a pretty trivial fold. I don't really see much of a reason not to make what may appear like a big laydown, but I think it's just fairly standard. He may even decide to do this with a hand like pocket queens, but I think that's kind of unlikely. I really just expect to see a king every time. So I'm going to make the fold and move forward in my life. So that's going to be it for this hand for PokerNews.com. I want to thank you for being here. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, please let me know in the comments section. I do read all the comments that you all post. Thank you for those, by the way. And I'll be back next week with another hand.